Crafting can be just like life, with ups and downs, going great or not really. Today I have one simple mixed media project that's just like that. I will take you along from start to finish, so let's get to it. I'm going to start by adding a mask to my cardstock. And because I'm using a mask instead of a stencil, because the mask is the pattern, instead of it having a firm outside shape with the pattern inside, I'm not just adding my big magnets on the Make Art station, I'm also adding the ruler with the little magnets. And this will help to keep that mask flat. I'm just getting some color down on my cardstock, and I have 3 different colors for a little bit of a variation. But you can also use just one color, that will work with this technique as well. And I'm using the Altenew brushes for this. This works really well with a mask, and I like them for a couple of reasons. One is that it doesn't damage your sponge applicator, because there is no sponge, so that's a no-brainer, right? But also it's more easy on your hands, on your wrists. If you like blending, and if you like blending a lot, then a brush like this is a bit easier to work with, as there is a bit less pressure on your wrists. So I'm not going for a perfect blend, I hardly ever do, but I just want some color variation and a little bit more or less color, that's totally fine. It will just all add to the interest of the finished background. And for the last color I'm going to let it fade out a little bit towards the bottom, so the color becomes softer with hardly any color at all at the edge of the card. And then I have my resist paste. And the resist paste is a thick creamy paste that I pick up with my blending tool. And for this I do use a blending tool with a sponge applicator. And for this I also have to make sure that I hold my mask down so it stays in place. And another thing that you should do, which I forgot but which is a clever thing to do, is to wipe your mask clean before you start adding the resist paste. So I'm just adding it in a circular motion, and on the sides I'm just wiping it to the outside. Now I'm not adding a really thick layer, I'm adding a thin layer which will create a bit of a grunge effect. But if you want a really crisp mask pattern, then make sure to add a bit more of the paste. But you will see in a bit what I mean. So I'm just wiping the last bits outside, and then I'm going to take off the mask. And it's ready for the next step right away. So for the next step I have a spray, and I'm going to spray from left to right. This is a new bottle, so it's first you get nothing and then you get a lot. But I'm also going to spray a bit of water, which will dilute and blend the color a little bit more. Now once I have sprayed my first bit of water and let the color drip off a little bit to the top, and then I'm going to tilt it the other way around, and I'm going to let the color drip down. Going to help it drip down a little bit more by spraying some more water, so I get some of that color at the bottom as well. And you can already see that the pattern is still visible in the background, and you can also see that bleeding or dripping effect at the bottom of that color. I'm just going to wiggle it about a bit, and then I'm also going to blot, because I don't want big blobs of color along the sides. So I'm going to blot the bigger blobs of color with my piece of kitchen paper. You can use a cloth as well, whatever you prefer. You can also let it air dry, that's totally up to you. I'm going to blot it also a bit at the bottom, so I get a bit more color variation, which will give me a bit more of that fading look that I'm going for. And then I put this page aside to dry. And after drying, nothing! I had no idea how to move on. So I put it aside, and it took days, weeks, months even. And then suddenly, a light bulb moment, and I was back in business. And once my inspiration was back, I grabbed my glossy accents. I've stamped and heat embossed a flower, and now I'm going to add little details along the outside edges of the flowers and the leaves to add some accents, basically glossy accents that is. And this is going to work as a little block for my next step. So I'm just adding some details here and there along the edges, and also some dots on those stamens. And this is not really a precision job. It's just adding some details in places where you think they may look nice. So I'm going along the edges of the flowers, and I'm checking here and there. Maybe I want a little bit more. And once I've added all my details, I'm going to let it dry. And this won't take long because it's a very thin layer. And for the next step, I have some dilution sprays on my desk. I'm going to screw off the cap, and with the tube I'm going to add a bit of that paint on my desk. For the regular dilution sprays you don't have to shake them because it's just an ink spray. But for the shimmer sprays you have to shake them because there's mica in it. The mica is a bit heavier than the ink, so it will sink to the bottom. And if you take it out without shaking, then you will only add the ink on your desk without the shimmer. So well, that's an option too if you want that, but I want some shimmer too. And once I have all those colors on my desk, I'm going to pick up the water brushes, and I have a piece of kitchen paper or a cloth that will work too. And then I'm going to add some color to my stamp. And I'm just going to use those inks or sprays as it were a watercolor, because it's always fun to use your inks and your sprays and all your stuff in different ways. I love that, so I do it all the time. I'm also using my kitchen paper to blot every now and then. If you have a smudge or if you went over a part that you didn't want in a certain color, just add some water and then blot, and you can dilute the ink and give it another color. It's that easy. Now I'm just having some good fun coloring the flowers, and especially with the brighter colors you can see really well that the parts that I blocked with the glossy accents are staying white, which is really cool because it's a simple way to add white accents without adding any white accents. So maybe it's a really big time saver as well. And maybe not. I don't know. It's just a way that you can add some white accents, which is cool. I'm just playing around with the different colors and I'm mixing and matching, so I get a bit of variation and a very bright and happy bunch of flowers. I'm going to go ahead and color some more flowers, and then we're going to get back to that background. And this is what the colored stamp looks like. So here I'm back with the background and the colored flowers, and now I'm going to make a fun composition on my background. And because I don't want to cover that complete background, I'm going to lay out those flowers and leave some open spaces on purpose and make a fun composition. So some filled spaces combined with open spaces. I'm also using some partial flowers because, well, it's a great way to use up bits and pieces. It's just a great way to use up some of those scraps. So once I have my flowers in place, I'm going to glue them down. And first I'm going to use some regular glue for the smaller pieces. And for the ones that I already know that are in the right place and the page doesn't need anything else, I'm going to glue those in place so I don't have to worry about them moving again. And once those tiny bits are in place, I'm going to add some white details. And I'm using a white ink for that, so I'm dipping in the brush and tapping on the handle, moving the brush in different directions so I get my splats on different places. And in the corner over the flowers I have a used dry wet wipe, so the splats only land on the rest of the page. Next I have the biggest flower that I colored, and I've added some tape to the back, and now I'm going to add some thread, and it's a shiny metallic thread in a bluish color. So I'm just going to press down the thread on the tape so it stays in place. I'm making some loops that will pop out from under the complete flower, so all around. And if you want to check what it looks like on the front, just turn your flower over and you can see what it looks like on the other side. So this is the flower with the shiny thread, and it's just a fun detail that is visible on the background, but it's not crazy popping out from the complete background. So it's just a fun little detail. So I'm adding my flowers back in place, and once I have them in the place that I want, I'm going to add some glue. I'm using the hot glue gun now, and this goes a little bit faster than using regular glue. But you can use regular glue or tape or whatever you want. Just use what works best for you. And then I'm going to add that big flower in place. And then I'm going to add the other flowers as well. And once I have all my flowers in place, I'm going to add some glitter details. And for that I'm using Nouveau Crystal drops. They are great to make drops, but you can also add some details in different ways. It's also an option to just add some details with these drops. You don't have to make drops of them. You can just use them any way you like. So I'm adding some of that glitter here and there all over my card and on some flowers and below some flowers. Just some fun details. And next I have the drops I made with the pixie powder, and I haven't used them yet, so it's about time. So first I'm going to pick up my custom colored drops by sliding them to the side and just sliding them off that backing piece. And I'm going to add them to my card, and once I have a few of those in place, I'm going to add them with the same drops I used to make the drops, because it's a glue also. So if you use the same glue, it's the same product, so it won't be visible. So in some different places I'm going to add those drops. And I'm just making a fun pattern again to see where I want some extra shiny details or a bit of color variation or a bit of dimension, which is also very cool. I love a good bit of dimension, so just adding my drops and gluing them in place. And then I have a little quote that I thought would be a nice fit with this page. I've saved up some of those drops so I can place them around the quote, so I have some space left for that quote. And once I have the quote in place, I'm going to glue it to my page. And then I'm going to add the final drops and place them around the quote. And just a few more of those drops at the top. I think it adds a bit more of a playful look to the background. And adding just some small details like this make it more fun. And yes, I know, it's totally the opposite of clean and simple. And I'm not quite sure what that is called. And to make a bit of a connection between that quote and the page, I'm going to outline it in a sort of a scribbly way with a thin fine liner in black. And that way they are more attached to the page. They are attached, of course, but that way it looks like they belong more on the page and they are more one with the page instead of just floating in that corner. And then my colorful happy flower page is done. And this page was really a lot of fun to make. Now don't you love a good ending? Almost like a fairy tale, happily ever after. Well, all silliness on a stick. If you need some more inspiration for whatever reason, there you go. And as always, make sure to keep on crafting.